after idols of foreign gods. Now, Samson did not guard his heart. He was led by his eyes instead of faith, and so he fell in love. Step into a world shrouded in mystery and intrigue, where the supernatural and sinister converge under the ominous title, the Unholy Bride of Satan. This isn't just a cautionary tale, it's a journey into the depths of allure and danger that certain women wield, veiled behind an irresistible facade. Discover the chilling truth about these women who embody a dark charisma, capable of ensnaring the unsuspecting with promises that lead to ruin. Unveil the secrets of their manipulation and the havoc they wreak on those who dare to get too close. There are two types of women in the Bible. There is the godly woman, the Proverbs 31 woman, the Esther, the Ruth, the Hannah kind of woman, prayerful, bold, wise, God-fearing. This woman's worth is far above rubies and pearls, according to the Bible. And then there's the ungodly woman. That's who I would like to talk about today. There are 3 ungodly women in the Bible that we should be aware of. But before we dive in, let me just say that the Bible gives us several warnings concerning the evil influence of ungodly women. Proverbs 9:13 in the Amplified Bible paints a vivid picture of a foolish woman. The foolish woman is restless and noisy. She is naive and easily misled and thoughtless, and knows nothing at all of eternal value. Similarly, Proverbs 21:19 underscores the misery caused by an ungodly woman. It is better to dwell in a desert land than with a contentious and troublesome woman. The ungodly woman is further depicted in Proverbs 11:22 as a ring of gold in a swine's snout. So is a beautiful woman who is without discretion. Her lack of character mocks her beauty. The Bible provides clear distinctions between godly and ungodly women, this emphasizing the importance of character and virtue. To understand this better, let's delve into the identities and actions of some notable women from the Bible, beginning with Herodias. Herodias was married to Herod Antipas, but both of them had previously been divorced, a situation that John the Baptist publicly condemned as adulterous. John's rebuke did not sit well with Herodias, leading her to harbor a deep resentment towards him. In Matthew 14, we learn about the extent of Herodias' vindictiveness. John had rebuked Herod, reminding him that his marriage to Herodias was unlawful. This led Herod to imprison John to placate Herodias. However, imprisonment was not enough for her. She wanted John silenced permanently. Her opportunity came during Herod's birthday celebration. Matthew 14:6-8 recounts the incident, but when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." Herodias' bitterness and anger had consumed her so thoroughly that she orchestrated a gruesome revenge. Her daughter, following her mother's prompting, asked for John's head, leading to his execution. Herodias used her daughter as a pawn to achieve her vengeful goals, illustrating the destructive power of an ungodly heart. This story is a stark reminder of the potential consequences of harboring bitterness and acting on vengeful impulses. Herodias' actions were driven by pride and a refusal to accept correction, contrasting sharply with the virtues of a godly woman. In contrast, let's consider the example of Ruth, a woman whose character and actions embody godliness. Ruth, a Moabite woman, demonstrated unwavering loyalty and faithfulness. After the death of her husband, she chose to stay with her mother-in-law, Naomi, saying, "Where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." Ruth 1:16. Ruth's story is one of redemption and blessing. Her loyalty and hard work led her to Boaz, a man of integrity, who took notice of her character. Ruth's actions and decisions were guided by faith and humility, qualities that are cherished by God. The juxtaposition of Herodias and Ruth offers valuable lessons. Herodias' life was marked by bitterness and manipulation, leading to destructive outcomes. Ruth's life, on the other hand, was characterized by loyalty, humility, and faith, resulting in blessings and honor. As we reflect on these contrasting examples, we are called to examine our own lives. Are our actions driven by selfish desires and bitterness, or do we strive to embody the virtues of loyalty, humility, and faith? The Bible encourages us to cultivate a godly character, as seen in Proverbs 31:30. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Ultimately, the stories of Herodias and Ruth remind us that true beauty and worth come from a heart aligned with God's will. While the world may emphasize external appearances and fleeting pleasures, God values the inner qualities of a person. By seeking to develop a godly character, we align ourselves with His purposes and experience the blessings that come from living a life that honors Him. Herodias was undoubtedly an ungodly woman, and her actions reveal her to be immoral, bitter, and manipulative. John the Baptist was a devoted servant of God, yet that did not matter to her. It is difficult to fathom that a disagreement or a word of rebuke could motivate someone to murder, but this is the power of bitterness. It causes a person's heart to grow cold, leading them to irrational thoughts and behaviors. Herodias' hatred for John was so intense that it clouded her judgment, driving her to extreme measures to satisfy her pride and sense of self-importance. She sought the life of a man of God simply because he disapproved of her actions. The evil influence of Herodias extended beyond herself. Not only did she harbor murderous intentions, but she also involved her daughter in her sinful scheme. By manipulating her daughter to request John's head on a platter, she showcased how an ungodly woman could use her position and power to cause immense destruction. In stark contrast, a godly woman influences those around her positively, acting as a peacemaker and leading others toward God and righteousness. Another case of an ungodly woman is Delilah. The story of Samson and Delilah is one of intrigue and betrayal. Samson, a man endowed with supernatural strength, fell due to his weakness for Delilah's beauty. To understand Delilah's role in Samson's downfall, we must first appreciate the unique gifts God bestowed upon Samson. He tore a lion apart with his bare hands and defeated 1,000 men using only the jawbone of a donkey. Despite these feats, Delilah managed to bring him down. Delilah, however, was not the real cause of Samson's downfall. The true culprits were sin, disobedience, and lust. The devil seized the opportunity provided by Samson's weaknesses and used Delilah to destroy him. Delilah was a pawn in the enemy's plan, exploiting Samson's vulnerabilities. Nevertheless, Samson was equally culpable as he willingly participated in sin. Both Delilah and Samson made choices that led to their downfall, emphasizing the destructive nature of sin and disobedience. In contrast to these ungodly women, consider the godly woman described in Proverbs 31. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. Proverbs 31:25-26. This woman exemplifies the virtues of strength, wisdom, and dignity, using her influence to uplift and guide those around her. Take the example of Esther, a godly woman who used her position to save her people. When faced with the annihilation of the Jewish people, Esther displayed courage and faith. She risked her life to approach the king and plead for her people, saying, "If I perish, I perish." Esther 4:16. Esther's actions were driven by her faith in God and her desire to do what was right, showcasing how a godly woman can be a beacon of hope and salvation. Similarly, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is another example of a godly woman whose life was marked by obedience and humility. When the angel Gabriel announced that she would bear the Son of God, Mary responded with faith and submission, "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled." Luke 1:38. Mary's willingness to accept God's plan for her life, despite the challenges it presented, demonstrates her deep faith and trust in God. These contrasting examples teach us important lessons about the impact of our choices and the nature of our influence. While ungodly women like Herodias and Delilah used their positions to manipulate and destroy, godly women like Esther and Mary used their influence to bring about positive change and fulfill God's purposes. As we reflect on these stories, we are called to examine our own lives and the influence we have on others. Are we driven by selfish desires and bitterness, or do we strive to embody the virtues of faith, humility, and obedience? The Bible encourages us to cultivate godly character, leading lives that honor God and positively impact those around us. By aligning ourselves with God's will and seeking His guidance, we can become beacons of light and agents of His love in a world that desperately needs it. The devil is cunning and often introduces people into our lives who appear to care for us, to love us, but underneath the surface they seek to destroy us. The Amplified translation of the Bible in Judges 16:4-6 provides an illustrative example. After this, he fell in love with a Philistine woman living in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. So the 5 lords governors of the Philistines came to her and said to her, "Persuade him and see where his great strength lies, and find out how we may overpower him, so that we may bind him to subdue him. And each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies and with what you may be bound and subdued." Samson's first mistake was falling in love with Delilah, a Philistine woman. As a judge appointed by God over Israel, Samson knew that God had often warned the Israelites against forming relationships with those outside their community. These relationships often led entire families astray, turning them to idols and foreign gods. Samson failed to guard his heart, allowing himself to be led by his eyes rather than by faith. He fell in love with someone he was never meant to be with, becoming yoked with a person whose intentions were far from pure. Delilah, from the very beginning, sought to gain at Samson's expense, enticed by the substantial sum of silver offered to her by the Philistine lords. In Judges 16:9-12, the Bible continues, "Now she had men lying in ambush in an inner room, and she said to him, 'The Philistines are upon you, Samson,' and he broke the cords as a string of tow breaks when it touches fire. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, 'See now, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now please tell me truthfully how you may be bound.' And he said to her, 'If they bind me tightly with new ropes that have not been used, then I will become weak and be like any other man.'" This narrative shows how Delilah persistently sought to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. She manipulated him emotionally, appealing to his affection for her while all the while plotting his downfall. Despite several attempts, Samson did not reveal the true source of his strength, which lay in his Nazirite vow to God. Delilah's deceit and Samson's eventual surrender to her wiles teach us vital lessons. The devil uses those closest to us to lead us away from God's purpose, wrapping his deception in the guise of love and care. We must be vigilant, guarding our hearts and staying true to our faith. Samson's downfall began with a failure to heed God's warnings, highlighting the importance of obedience and discernment in our relationships. A godly life requires vigilance. Proverbs 4:23 advises, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. This means we must be careful about who we allow into our inner circle. Just as Samson was led astray by Delilah, we too can be led astray if we do not guard our hearts and remain anchored in God's word. Moreover, Delilah's actions exemplify how ungodly influences can be destructive. Her willingness to betray Samson for monetary gain shows how easily one's values can be compromised when driven by selfish desires. In contrast, a godly individual prioritizes righteousness and integrity, even when faced with personal gain or advantage. In the New Testament, we see the ultimate example of pure, selfless love in Jesus Christ. Unlike Delilah, who sought to destroy, Jesus came to save and restore. John 10:10 states, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life, and have it to the full." This verse contrasts the destructive intentions of the enemy with the life-giving mission of Christ. Reflecting on Samson and Delilah's story encourages us to evaluate our own lives. Are there influences that lead us away from God's purpose? Are we allowing the devil to use seemingly harmless relationships to entrap us? Let us be vigilant, discerning, and steadfast in our faith, always seeking to align our lives with God's will. By doing so, we can avoid the pitfalls that led to Samson's downfall and live lives that honor and glorify God. Samson was intimately involved with Delilah, which blinded him to the danger she posed. Despite multiple attempts to uncover the secret of his strength, he failed to see the clear warnings before him. Delilah was not only a temptress but also persistent and cunning. Her manipulation is evident in Judges 16:15-17. Then she said to him, "How can you say, 'I love you,' when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength lies," when she pressured him day after day with her words and pleaded with him. He was annoyed to death. Then finally he told her everything that was in his heart and said to her, "A razor has never been used on my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak and be like any other man." Ultimately, Samson succumbed to Delilah's manipulation, resulting in the loss of his God-given strength. Several important lessons emerge from this narrative. Not everyone who professes to be on your side truly is. Just as God can send people into your life to encourage and uplift you, the enemy can send individuals to lead you astray and bring about your downfall. Now, let's examine another infamous example of ungodliness, Jezebel. Jezebel's background is notorious. She was married to King Ahab and wielded considerable influence over him. She was a fervent worshiper of multiple false gods, including Baal and Asherah. Jezebel's malicious actions included attempting to kill the prophets of the God of Israel. Her greed led her to orchestrate the murder of Naboth to seize his land. She maintained a close circle of nearly 1,000 false prophets who ate at her table. Jezebel's story is one of extreme wickedness and manipulation. Her influence over King Ahab was not just a matter of personal power, but also a profound spiritual corruption. She led Ahab and the people of Israel away from God, promoting idol worship and immoral practices. Jezebel's actions were driven by her desire for power and control, often resorting to violence and deceit to achieve her goals. In 1 Kings 21:25-26, the Bible paints a clear picture of Jezebel's influence. There was never anyone like Ahab, who sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, urged on by Jezebel his wife. He behaved in the vilest manner by going after idols. Like the Amorites the Lord drove out before Israel, Jezebel's legacy is a stark warning about the dangers of ungodly influence and the corrupting power of idolatry and greed. In contrast to these ungodly women, let us look at the example of a godly woman. Proverbs 31:10-31 describes the virtuous woman whose worth is far above rubies. She is trustworthy, hardworking, compassionate, and wise. Her influence on her household is positive, and she brings honor to her family. A godly woman, unlike Herodias, Delilah, or Jezebel, seeks to honor God in her actions and relationships. The story of these ungodly women serves as a cautionary tale. Herodias, with her bitter and manipulative heart, Delilah, with her deceitful persistence, and Jezebel, with her idolatrous influence, all demonstrate how far a person can fall when they allow ungodly desires to take root. Their stories remind us to guard our hearts, to seek God's wisdom in our relationships, and to strive for godliness in all aspects of our lives. We must be vigilant against the subtle influences that can lead us astray. Ephesians 6:11-12 advises us to put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. This passage reminds us that our battle is not just physical but spiritual, and we need God's strength and protection to stand firm. In conclusion, the lives of Herodias, Delilah, and Jezebel teach us about the destructive power of ungodly influences and the importance of living a life that honors God. These stories urge us to evaluate our own lives and relationships, ensuring that we align ourselves with God's will and surround ourselves with influences that draw us closer to Him. By doing so, we can avoid the pitfalls of sin and live lives that reflect God's love and righteousness. To understand the essence of Jezebel, we must delve deeper into her characteristics and the underlying spirit she embodied. Many people often associate the spirit of Jezebel with sex, seduction, and promiscuity, but these are merely the outward manifestations of a much more insidious force. At the heart of Jezebel's spirit is a desire for control, a controlling, manipulative spirit that seeks to dominate and captivate those around it. One of Jezebel's most evident traits was her controlling nature. This can be seen in how she controlled her husband, King Ahab, and influenced the religious practices of the entire nation of Israel. Jezebel's ultimate goal was to advance her own agendas, irrespective of the consequences for others. She manipulated and coerced those around her to achieve her aims, demonstrating that a Jezebel spirit is a menacing force that seeks to dominate and control. Another characteristic of the Jezebel spirit is its use of fear as a tool for control. Jezebel instilled fear into the hearts of the people, especially those who opposed her. Her threats were not idle. She followed through with brutal acts, such as the murder of Naboth to seize his vineyard and her persistent threats against the prophet Elijah. These acts of intimidation caused even the boldest of God's servants to flee in fear. The Apostle Paul reminds us in 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." A spirit that seeks to frighten and control is not of God, it is a tool of Satan. The third key trait of Jezebel was her blatant disregard for authority. As queen, she believed herself to be above all others, showing no respect for God's prophets or His laws. Jezebel's contempt for divine authority was evident in her interactions with Elijah. Even after witnessing the power of God on Mount Carmel, where Elijah defeated the prophets of Baal, she refused to repent or acknowledge God's sovereignty. Her final act of defiance came when she taunted Jehu, the military commander of Israel's army, moments before her death. This spirit of rebellion against established order and hierarchy is still evident today in individuals who chase selfish gains with no regard for structure or authority. Reflecting on these traits, it is clear that the spirit of Jezebel is not confined to the past but is present in various forms today. In contrast to Jezebel's spirit, Proverbs 31:30 offers a timeless description of a godly woman's charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. This verse underscores that superficial qualities such as charm and beauty are temporary and often misleading. True godliness is found in a woman who fears the Lord, who worships, obeys, serves, and trusts Him with reverent respect. Being a godly woman is not about outward appearances or superficial actions. It's not about how one looks on Sundays or the photos posted in church attire. A godly woman is defined by her inner qualities, her reverence for God, her dedication to His service, and her obedience to His commands. She is someone who embodies the spirit of humility, love, and respect for God's authority, in stark contrast to the manipulative, controlling, and rebellious spirit of Jezebel. In summary, the stories of Herodias, Delilah, and Jezebel serve as cautionary tales, illustrating the destructive power of ungodly influences and the importance of living a life that honors God. Herodias with her bitterness and manipulation, Delilah with her deceit and temptation, and Jezebel with her control and rebellion all demonstrate how far one can fall when led by ungodly desires. These narratives remind us to guard our hearts, seek God's wisdom in our relationships, and strive for godliness in all aspects of our lives. By doing so, we can avoid the pitfalls of sin and live lives that reflect God's love and righteousness. Bonus. In exploring Christian motivation through biblical narratives, we encounter exemplary figures whose lives reflect profound lessons and principles. Esther and Jezebel stand as contrasting examples of the impact and consequences of influence. Esther chosen by God for a specific purpose. Esther's courageous stand against injustice and her unwavering faith in God's providence illustrate the transformative power of faith. Through her bravery, humility, and wisdom, Esther became a pivotal figure in delivering her people from destruction, demonstrating that God uses those who trust Him to accomplish His purposes. Jezebel, in stark contrast, Jezebel exemplifies the destructive potential of influence when guided by selfish ambition and disregard for God's will. Her manipulative tactics and idolatrous practices led to significant moral and spiritual decay within Israel, highlighting the dangers of unchecked power and pride. These biblical narratives serve as profound reminders of the importance of discernment and alignment with God's will in wielding influence. As Christians, we are called to emulate the faithfulness and courage of Esther while rejecting the self-serving and destructive patterns exemplified by Jezebel. By seeking God's guidance and walking in obedience to His Word, we can cultivate a positive and impactful influence that reflects His glory and advances His kingdom. Conclusion. And when you look at what influence really means, it's the capacity or power to be a compelling force. Influence affects the actions, behavior, and opinions of others. God used Esther, and she became a powerful woman of wisdom and influence. She was used by the Lord to save His people. On the opposite side of things, Jezebel was used by the devil to try and hinder God's work through Elijah. She too was a woman of influence, but not the kind of influence that you should ever desire to have.